On. Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Hungry People podcast, home of the hungry people. It is your boy, Michael Patrick Buckley, and here with my co-host, the legend, the killer, AJ Dybka. Guys, we have a special guest for you today, Michael Perrine. He is a colon hydrotherapist out in Ashland, Oregon. And, it's been really awesome connecting with Michael online. I started following Michael back in early 2020. And I'm just like the kid on there who's asking all these crazy questions and just talking to an intelligent guy. And was willing to every single time answer my question. And that's just something that you don't see on social media nowadays is you have these intelligent people that everyone wants to talk to, and they sometimes just don't give them the time of day. And I just know that I'm just so appreciative of Michael and what he puts out on social media, and his message is truly awesome. And it's just amazing being able to share the space with you. So Michael, welcome to the podcast. We are so happy to have you on. I know you have a kid, your kid looks amazing. You look amazing. Your wife looks amazing. It's so awesome for you to be here.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I was really stoked when you guys asked me to come on here. So I appreciate it very, very much. And doing a late night Saturday session. So spending a Saturday night with me, talking about excretions and shitting and pissing and sweating, and it's a big ask. So I appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure.
And your shirt looks pretty cool. Is that a durian?
Yeah, this is actually, my podcast schedule got all messed up with COVID because a lot of people didn't go to work and they were watching Tiger King, and there was just I had to go extra hard into work because we tried to save the New York studio, which we did successfully. We had to do all this online work. I had to rearrange things. We had to rearrange our entire structure of our business, renegotiate leases, reconfigure insurance policies. So I was just and then my son was born in the middle of the pandemic. My youngest son, I have 2 children, and my youngest son was born right in the middle of the pandemic, and I never got back on the podcast schedule. And my last podcast, I have 4 of them in the bank that will be coming out this year. It was with probably one of the top 5 most knowledgeable people in the world on durian, which is one of my favorite fruits. So I made this shirt sort of to celebrate the release of that podcast that is yet to come out. So anyway, so thanks for the compliment. This is from my company, Roots and Sky Clothing. So
wow, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it looks legit.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. How's everyone doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I just got off a 15-hour shift. We're happy to be here. I'm excited to be here. I do sales, merchandising, and then I was picking up some delivery money as well. And then I do side sales with Supercells, this company that I work with. So just dabbling in a couple of different things, but long day, but really actually feel woken up from this conversation. Happy to be here. Looking forward to learning more about what you've been through and your processes on how you go to obtain health and sustain health with your family. And then also the people who come into your life who are seeking to just feel a little better because, as you both are well aware, there's a lot of people suffering, a lot of people feeling pretty shitty nowadays, probably more than ever. So I would love to know, how you kind of started getting into this. You had mentioned around before we started recording, age of 19, you started to dive into this 1994. I was only 2 years old, which is pretty crazy to think about.
I wasn't even born yet.
I'm the old guy in the room for sure.
But if you wanted to if you wanted to start touching in on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, I came from we were talking about where we're from. We're all from the East Coast. I'm in Ashland now. I have a studio in New York. I have a studio in New Jersey, and I have a studio in Ashland here. This is the funky little hippie one where I have now come to live my life and relax. And the studio in New York is basically in Times Square. It's actually in Herald Square, right next to Macy's. It's intense, dense energy, and that's been the last 6 years of my life in New York. So being here is great. I can hear children playing in the playground, and it's just beautiful mountains over there. And,
what part of Jersey is your other place?
It's in Hoboken.
Okay.
And that's a new one that my business partner Adriana opened up. So I'm originally from New York. I'm from a place called Staten Island, New York, which is actually a magical, weird little bizarre place. And I grew up in the 80s and 90s in New York. The thing is, there's a lot of really amazing, sweet people there, Like my family's really sweet and amazing, right? Do you guys ever watch the show Impractical Jokers?
Oh, it's
Yeah,
so funny.
yeah. I went to high school with those guys, so like,
Oh,
there's
no
a lot of,
way.
yeah, there's a lot of guys like that, like really cool, sweet, funny people. And then there's a lot of like dangerous people there too. There's a lot of mafia, and like there in the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of violence and stuff like that. So there's a lot of bad elements, and I went right for the bad elements immediately as I was growing up. Just like my rebellious nature, my family life at home was awesome, but as soon as I got a taste of alcohol and cigarettes and that culture, and of course, as soon as I could take care of my own food, I was just eating garbage all the time. Like it was just pure indulgence in the worst way. And by the time I was 19 years old, not only had I made like bad life decisions and gotten myself in just in a bad, very loserish place, where like I wasn't working, I was like living in my parents' house, I was drinking, 6 to 7 days a week, I was completely out of shape, I was having all sorts of bowel issues, and so I got myself in a bad place very quickly when I should have been at my prime. I was really at my worst. I had a lot of alcohol problems, was addicted to cigarettes from the age of like 12 on, started drinking when I was about 12 as well. So it was a bad state of affairs by the time I got to 19. And
were you feeling okay? Were you feeling sick, or were you just kind of a mess?
I was feeling gross. But here's the thing, when we're younger, of course, like if I did that same behavior now, oh my God, like I would just be, in my 40s, forget about it. Like, right. I eat too late at night, and it's like, it takes a little bit to recover from that now, but then, so when we're teenagers, college age, whatever, like, we can kind of get through stuff like that. But I was going hard. I was like, I had like a death wish. I was like going hard on that. And,
Wow.
it was weird because it's like, I was always a good soul as a kid, I think. I think eventually in my adult life, as we'll talk about now, like I really sort of opened that up. But with those influences around me, it was just, it was hard for me to have willpower and discipline to stay away from them. Let me put it that way.
Were these friends of yours that were influencing you, or was it like people you were looking up to, like grown-ups, people older than you?
Yeah, it was. So like, it was definitely friends of mine. It was definitely people around me. First of all, there was the culture of the 80s and 90s. Like I remember sitting at my grandmother's house every Sunday, and we would all, I'd sit in front of the TV. So here am I watching TV, we're eating pasta and cheese and like all the things, that people grow up on. And at the end of the later in the afternoon into the evening, like the whole family would sit around the table and everybody was smoking. It was a cloud of smoke, and they were drinking and they were playing cards. And it was just like that New York Italian family thing going on. And that was what people did in the 80s. And of course, like, like my mom's like horrified now, like that, I wasn't even around that, but that was normal for people. So there was that element of it, just that introduction to like a toxic lifestyle, because that was the norm. But then like drug culture was huge. Alcohol culture was huge. Like when I talk, I call Staten Island like this little magical fun place, because like it had all this sweetness, but then it had a lot of exposure to things you don't want your kids to have exposure to. So like my math teacher used to, I'd be in his math class at 1:45. And then by 7:30 p.m. on Friday night, he'd be checking my fake ID and letting me into a bar because he was the bouncer. And it was just like, he knew exactly who I was, but it was just that kind of place.
Wow.
There was alcohol. There was a lot of people looking the other way. Let me put it that way. Now, not everybody fell into it hard and gross like I did. A lot of my friends did. Some of them didn't make it. Some of them, they partied a bunch. They got their shit together, and for whatever reason, they just didn't have the same addictive qualities that I have. But alcoholism runs in my family. I'm a very indulgent person, and also like anxiety runs in my family. So when I was growing up, going out, like when we first started, like getting drunk is fun, and like eating whatever you want, and passing out with cheese fries on you is I'm 15.
Cool,
like
yeah.
I'm 15. It's
like
fun.
everyone's dream to do that.
But going out in the social culture where I was from it was very violent. I was stabbed with a kitchen knife when I was 12 years old on the street by somebody. Wow. So like I always had, with the anxiety I think that I got from my family and the violent social culture growing up as a male, being drunk was a lot easier to walk into situations. You
Right.
walk into a dark parking lot where there's like, 250 people, everybody drinking, everybody partying, gangs here, like it's a lot easier to walk in
Wow.
when you don't have that hyper awareness of like what's going to go down. And then if something did go down, it's not as scary. So I used it as the medication for my anxiety, just to kind of be in the world at that time.
Wow.
So I started using alcohol like almost medicinally. It was my medicine because it allowed me to go function in this sort of culture. And this wasn't every time I went out, but there was a lot of situations like that, so I used it that way. And then it really caught up to me. And by 19, I realized I was realizing a lot of things about my life. And I was real sick one day, like just feeling so hungover and gross. And I walked into my parents' basement and I picked up a book, and it was the original printing of the autobiography of Malcolm X. And I don't know why, but something was like, you have to read this book. And I started reading that book, and it was a spiritual experience for me. It was the first place that I really learned self-responsibility. It was the first strong male in my life, because I couldn't connect to my father because he worked his whole life and took care of the family, but I'd never worked a day in my life, really. I mean, I had some jobs, but like I couldn't understand because I didn't have enough wisdom and life experience. And Malcolm's life was just, because I think he wasn't in my family, and because it was just so much easier for me to like kind of see it and vibe with it and feel it. Right. And then like, before that, like I had two aspirations in life. Basically, I wanted to either be a rock star, but I had no musical talent, or I was thinking about working with the mafia, because in my high school, we recited the movie Goodfellas like other kids recited Star Wars like lines and stuff like that. It was just part of the culture. Like for real, like they had to remove books out of our high school library because there were students' fathers in the books, and they didn't just want that in the mix and people learning about that. So those are my two aspirations, because I didn't want to go to work like everybody else. I didn't have anything I was passionate about, but connecting to Malcolm's life and realizing how unrealistic that was, and realizing how powerful somebody could be in when they're really sort of standing in their power and in alignment with their life purpose, and watching his transformation and learning self-responsibility and learning how I was really the cause of all my own problems. And I was like, wait, I'm a young white male in America, and I'm like destroying my body and my life. Like how many people would like smack me upside the head for that? Like, what are you, an idiot? Like, what are you doing?
And you probably I guess you probably had no one there to do that for you, right? To like kind of say, hey, dude, like, what are you doing? You got to make a change. Something's wrong.
I had my dad doing that, but like I said, like we rebel against our parents. I had my parents giving me all sorts of good advice, but I wasn't able to handle it, to take it in properly. My friends tried to pull me back in, so like the moment you tell them like, oh, I stopped drinking, I haven't drank for, oh, just have one beer then. Like it's nothing major, but it's these little things.
Yeah.
The amount of times I got pulled back into just have one cigarette, just have a beer, just come out with us tonight, just come out with, it's like, I don't know. The misery loves company thing is interesting,
Right. So
you
had mentioned anxiety kind of runs in your family and stuff. Did that affect you? And did it affect you on a social level? And what I mean by that is like the drinking usually helps people chill out, calm down, and be more social. Did you have an issue with socializing with other people? Were you an extrovert? Did you like to go out a lot?
I'm a mix of both, I think. And I loved to go out, but I think it was more the violent subculture there than anything else, because like I can go out with my friends, I wasn't like that. Like I wasn't that type of anxious to like have a social situation. It was more
you weren't like timid or anything.
No, it was just more like, always on edge. Like who's going to walk in here tonight? What's going to go on here tonight? Yeah. Because enough things happened all the time that like, you're always kind of like, okay. My wife makes fun of me now because of the way I am, She's like, I'm like always having the doors locked. I'm always like, and I'm like, listen, I've had my bike stolen. I've seen dead bodies. I've been stabbed. I've been like in fights. Like, and she's like, it's not like that out here. And I'm like, yeah, no, I got you. Right. She sees it in my parents too. And I'm like, listen, you have to understand where they, where we came from, and listen, I didn't come from the mean streets, but New York in the 80s and 90s, you're in the fishbowl, so things happen. So you worry about your family, you worry about your safety, so not as, I don't know what's going on there now, but like, I heard it actually got bad again, but yeah, like when I was a teenager, there was concerns.
Yeah, I can imagine up where you are now. You're probably like, I don't care. Let's leave it unlocked. I'm ready. I'm ready to rock and roll. I've had the experience already. But what was like the defining moment for you that really made you change your ways, that really made you change your habits and turn your life around?
It was somewhere in the reading of that book. And there was this very quick realization that the self-responsibility was one of the biggest things that I've ever learned. I see people struggle with it to this day, like clients on the table, a lot of times with what they're eating or whatever. Like, I talk to people about why they're experiencing certain things, like especially guys. Like I remember this one guy came in and like life had just hit him with a truck. He was like 30 something. He was married, 2 kids. He had all these pains. He had this big shelf gut, Italian guy from Long Island. And he came in and we're talking and like, he just didn't know what to do. He did everything that his family did and what the culture told him to eat. And like, now he's suffering. And so I'm talking to him about it. He's like, okay, well, like I'm going to a barbecue later. It's like a family thing. And he's like, so like, what am I supposed to eat there or something? And I'm like, first of all, I don't know what your family eats. Second of all, you just listen to me talk about food for 45 minutes. So you know that the food that your family eats is the food that's causing your problems. He's already like trying to find out how he's already trying to figure out how the external circumstance is going to cater to him instead of taking control and being self-responsible. People do with the airlines too. Oh, but they don't have that on an airplane. What do I have to bring my own food? It's like, yeah, don't throw a tantrum about it. Like the airline does not have your best interests at heart when it comes to what's going on. It's like, you have to do that yourself. You have to be self-responsible.
Yeah. No one really has, you have your own self-interest. You should, at least. No one's out there going to save you. You got to step it to the plate yourself. Now
the culture sabotages as well.
Yeah. So you've been vegan / plant-based for what, 27 years?
27 years. It was like 94, 95. I started eating that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now did this come along too with like your transition to a better life?
Everything happened in a short amount of time.
Okay.
Yeah. Read the autobiography of Malcolm X, learned self-responsibility, inspired by his life. I'm going to say this like it happened real easy. It wasn't easy. Quit drinking, quit smoking, quit doing other drugs. I didn't have other drug problems and addictions, but, we dabbled, we did things. And, so got rid of all of that, which was a challenge. And then started educating myself. I was modeling Malcolm X. And not that I wanted to be Muslim or whatever, but like, I just really recognized his, the seriousness he was taking his life. Yeah. His discipline, his enthusiasm about his empowerment. He was like, okay, he wanted to educate himself to the best of his ability. So he was in prison. He was rewriting the dictionary, learning every word, reading books. So I was like, okay, I thought, I'm going to start, consuming as much, I spend a lot of time killing brain cells. So I'm like, I'm going to start consuming as much knowledge as I possibly can. And I didn't know anything about health food. I was like, I just know that soy milk has no cholesterol and that's a good thing. Maybe that'll help me. I was 60 pounds heavier than I am now and in awful shape. Right. So I was like, okay, I will go to the health food store in my neighborhood and I'm going to go buy soy milk. Like, I don't even recommend soy milk now for people, but like, I was like, that's the extent of my health knowledge. Walked in there, saw a book. I have it here. I don't have it here. Saw a book called Diet for a New America by a guy named John Robbins. Yeah. And Robbins some friends of mine. Yeah. You know the book?
Yeah. John Robbins is super cool.
Yeah. I saw that book and friends of mine had recommended it and I picked it up and I just started consuming it immediately. And I didn't know that animals were treated the way they were. I didn't know that poisons, accumulated up the food chain. I didn't know there was a relationship between diet and disease aside from making people fat. I knew kind of something about heart attacks. If you ate too much red meat and you were old, like that was the extent of it. I was young and dumb. And reading that book just opened my eyes. I was vegan in like 3 days.
Wow.
And I went into some deep, deep cleansing responses. All of a sudden now I'm eating tofu and sprouted bread. And, I went from like macaroni and cheese at 40 ounces and McDonald's and like, now we're into health food.
And you were like about 20 or 19 at the time still?
19 years old. Yeah, 19.
Interesting that you went through the detox process because when I switched from like you're saying, mac and cheese, cheeseburgers every night, 5 peanut butter and jellies before bed, when I switched over to like fruit and white rice, I had no detox symptoms at all. In fact, I literally just started feeling better that day. And it wasn't until I got older that I got more into the like detoxy type stuff. So what kind of detox symptoms were you experiencing switching over? Because you were still eating cooked food, right? You were still eating, like you said, the tofu and the breads and stuff. What kind of symptoms were you experiencing?
Well, here's another thing to add in though. Aside from all the alcohol, cigarette, and bad food, toxic behaviors, I worked in the photo industry, and I had a lot of chemical exposure. Yeah. So what started to happen was a lot of fever and body aches, skin eruptions, a lot of fevers and body aches. And first I didn't realize what was happening. Dr. Fred Bishy explained to me later about how chemical toxicity can cause the same symptoms as viral infection. It's still an immune response to toxicity in the bloodstream. And now I know that really well, and I could actually tell the difference in my own body, but when I worn down and if I had like a virus versus if I were detoxing. Tasting chemicals in my mouth, rapid weight loss. I lost 60 pounds in like 3 months, about 3 months, maybe a little more. And I didn't know anything about colonics. I didn't know anything about saunas. I didn't even know like a massage was a good thing. I mean, I knew it was a good thing, but I thought it was more of like a luxury thing. I didn't know it was actually something that was going to help clear the tissue and increase circulation. I didn't know anything. I was brand new, learning about my body and health and our food supply and all just trying to navigate this stuff and figure it out. So that's why I think it was so intense for me, because I had a very toxic past. And just thinking back, like all the things we used to do, all the things I've inhaled, and like we used to burn things of plastic and like these abandoned foundations in New York, and like the amount of stuff that must have come through my system, also living on an island that had the largest garbage dump in the world on it.
My uncles, they grew up in the 70s, and my mom tells me stories of, because they always were trying to get high, right? So the truck would come by that sprays for all the mosquitoes, and they would run behind the truck and like breathe it all in so that they could get a high off it.
I've heard this. Somebody told me, they said, Mike, when the what was it? It wasn't Malthion, was it?
I couldn't tell you. I don't know.
It was either Malthion or what's the other one? I can't think of it right now. But they used to, because they would spray the streets with it, they would scent it. So it smelled good, and the kids would ride with their bikes in the back. And that was what your uncle was doing. They would take deep breaths of this stuff. Was it Malthion? Malthion is something they still spray in Staten Island and in New York for mosquito, for not Zika, but the other virus.
West Nile or something. West
Nile. Yeah. I think they used to even spray DDT maybe back in the 70s. I'm not sure when they outlawed that. Yeah. So that's that, growing up in that,
Right. So how long of a process was it that you were feeling these detox symptoms? Did you start feeling better because you were losing weight and stuff? I assume you had more energy, or you were sleeping better or something.
Yeah, some things happened. I mean, life was a lot less stressful back then too, but I was feeling good. I was going through pockets of it. It took years before I cleared the deep detoxes. Years, they would just come hit me cyclically in waves. And then it would just hit me again. And of course I was upping my game and getting into more cleansing stuff and like changing my diet here and there. But it took a while. It takes a long time to clear toxicity out of the tissue. And I'm sure I still have some in me now. I'm not in any race to get it all out of me. But the surface stuff and the bulk of it, the main load of toxicity that we carry is really important to clear.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good start with finding John Robbins. You could have found like a paleo book or a low carb book or something like that. So it's a pretty good start to your journey now once you started seeking that, right?
Yeah, there was a movement in the music scene, in the hardcore music scene, for veganism.
Yeah.
And there was like this Hare Krishna elements to it as well. So a lot of my friends were talking to me about it, and I was just like, not about it.
Are you familiar with John Joseph?
Yeah, he's a good friend of mine, actually.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
So cool.
My cousin wants he wants me to get him on the podcast so bad. He's like, he looks up to him because he grew up in the hardcore scene, and we were all into straight edge and things like that.
He'll do it. He's so incredibly generous. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, he'll definitely do it. John is a friend of mine. I met John in 1997 at Angelica Kitchen. He was one of the patrons there, and I've known him since.
Is that like the soup kitchens?
No, Angelica Kitchen was a cultural icon. I can't explain it. I go hard on this in my podcast, and my wife is always like, well, are you talking about that place again? I worked there for 7 years, but it wasn't just a restaurant. It was a movement in a way. And it was a consciousness. Like, it was one of the greatest places ever to have ever existed on the planet in regards to farm to table food, veganism, self-care, it was an experience when you walked in, and it was full of weirdo New Yorkers and celebrities and musicians. And like, it was magic. That place was absolute magic. And it's responsible for a lot of what we have today. A lot of people don't realize it, but a lot of the people like John Joseph, that was his bread and butter place. That was like where he grounded in, right there in the East Village, like different Prana, the health food store Prana, the Hare Krishna temple, and Angelica Kitchen were probably three of the places where he really kind of cultivated a lot of his ideas there, as they were for me. Like I grew up.
I've heard
there
him mention it a bunch of times on the Rich Roll podcast. Like he always talks about those places.
Yeah, they're amazing. And he wasn't always sweet Uncle John. I'll tell you that. I remember the first time I came home,
Dude's
and
a badass. Yeah.
my girlfriend at the time is like, yeah, some dude called. It sounded like there was some urgency and he was looking for you. And I was like, oh, who is it? His name is John Joseph. And I was like, fuck. I was like, I don't know where this is going right now. You know? So yeah, he wasn't always, you know, he's a badass motherfucker, you know?
Yeah, that's awesome for sure. He's got
now
stories,
he's everybody's favorite. Now he's everybody's favorite vegan uncle. But like, you know, I'm telling you, like his badassness, it was a real thing back in the day. So.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
if everyone listening, if you go back to like the early days when Rich Roll first had him on, because I think he's had him on like 4, 5, 7 times now, he kind of goes through his life story, and what a story it is. We can maybe we can link that below if I can find it for us.
Yeah, actually, I'd love to see it. I haven't watched it.
It's pretty
I'm
awesome.
interested. I mean, I've seen some of his work.
Dude.
Yeah. He seems
really
like a
good human.
Yeah.
Solid human, good human. Gives away food, gives away money, gives away his time. He really gets. And like, I try to be like conscious and spiritual, and I'm doing all my own work in life, but like, he's someone that really gets the transitory nature of life. So he wants to be as of service as he can while he's here. And he doesn't give a shit about belongings or money or anything like that. He doesn't chase any of that stuff.
Wow.
So, he's given away so much food and money to people and helped people. It's incredible.
Reminds me of Arnold Kaufman. Do you know Arnold?
Yes, I do know Arnold.
Yeah, he's always giving away food. He's always helping people. He's pretty awesome.
Yeah, he's a funny dude.
Speaking of Arnold, have you ever been to the Woodstock Fear Festival?
I've not. I was supposed to go a couple of years ago. My last time in New York, I was going to go up to, no, not my last time in New York, my last summer in New York, time before the last, I was supposed to go to the Woodstock Fruit Festival, and the person I was going with, their car broke down.
Oh,
and
wow.
I was like, I couldn't go at that point. And I was like, okay. And I wasn't going to like go rent a car and do the whole thing. I was just kind of tagging along. So no, I've never been there. Have you guys been there?
Yeah. Last year was my first year, and AJ, you've been 3 years, I think.
3 years. Yeah. It's pretty incredible. Met a lot of cool people. Do you ever plan on going, or is it kind of, you got too many things going on?
Well, right now I don't. So I always planned on going. I always wanted to go. It wasn't that far from where I lived. I lived right in New York City. I mean, it's just a couple hours up north or whatever, but it's very difficult to leave my son now, you know? So sure. I have an older son and a young son. So I might bring him with me, you know, as he gets a little older. He doesn't even take long car rides really well now. So I can't imagine getting him on a plane for 6 hours over to the East Coast yet. Right. But we'll get there. But yeah, you guys it's fun over there, right?
Oh yeah, it's a
blast.
For sure.
Yeah. I really want to go there. I know Kyle loves it. Kyle's been out there a lot. We were talking about Kyle earlier.
Kyle.
Yeah, one of the greatest humans in the world. Yeah,
super cool, dude. So no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, if I ever get the chance to get away, my first trip is probably going to be to go on one of the durian tours in Southeast Asia or Borneo with Lindsay. They just moved the whole durian operations here, not to Ashland, but 10 minutes away in Medford. And she lives right in this area. And she posted something on Instagram once, and she was like, hey, I'm in Medford, Oregon, and I'm getting this durian or whatever. And I was like, wait, because I'd been following her for like 5-6 years. And I was like, that's like 10 minutes from my house. So I immediately hit her up, and I was like, podcast? You know, and that's how I got her on the podcast. I was like,
is she the durian rider woman? Is that the same woman?
Yes. Yeah, not durian rider like Harley, but durian writer.
Right.
Yeah. And she's the most knowledgeable human on the planet with durian. She's her partner Richard, amazing people. And
wow, that's awesome.
Okay, so you found that book, you started eating, over 3 months, you started to lose weight, lost 60 pounds, feeling better, started some of that detox process. Where did it evolve from there? Did you start changing other habits as well? Like, did you eliminate the drugs, alcohol, and cigarettes over that 3 months, or did that go on for a little while longer? Kind of
so fast.
Speed. Yeah.
So fast. I started dropping things like that. I mean, alcohol and cigarettes were hard because I was part of a social scene trying to find my sense of friends and stuff now. And I used to go to the diner when I learned you don't quit smoking until you quit drinking first, because you make bad decisions when you're drinking and you're never going to quit smoking. So I used to go chain smoke cigarettes. You could smoke in diners back then. And I would hang out with different friends of mine that would like, I have some very artistic friends and stuff. My friend is kind of a famous artist now. His name is James Rizzi. And like he would sit and we would just like talk about girls and life, and he would draw things on all the napkins, and we'd smoke cigarettes and drink coffees with half and half. And I did that for like 3 months in the beginning, just to stay away from alcohol, just to get like to be able to go out and not just be kept up in the house, and like, connect with friends, because it's super important when you're 19, and just be away from all that shit, and then eventually I finally was able to get cigarettes out. But it happened quick. I was very inspired. And look, we know when we're in our or late teens, early 20s, very idealistic age, like, I was just really like going towards principle at that point. I was living by a higher set of standards and principles at that point. Very excited by it, enthusiastic about the whole process. So quick.
Right.
Yeah. So the detox was hard.
I like that you brought up the fact that you kind of used some, what people could look at as negative habits, as your solution temporarily. And I feel as though there's always this mindset, especially you must see this, more than MP and I, since you have such a large following, you interact with so many people just want to do it perfect right off the bat, or they're not going to do a fucking thing at all. Right. So I think that's actually a really healthy approach, to be able to say, hey, I'm trying to get rid of this thing that's like really weighing on me so heavily. I'm going to use some of these other things that maybe aren't the best, but I know that I'm stepping in the right direction, because this whole thing is an evolution, right? So do you find that you're seeing that a lot, where people just kind of are snapping back and forth?
Yeah, well, we replace addictions a lot too. And I did that for a while, until you can really be free and have complete mastery over your desires. Dr. Fred Bishop, who's been a great influence of mine, we'll get to him in a moment, but like, he used to like be like, Michael, pray to God for mastery over your desires and cravings. Like, he's a little more of an old school gentleman. He's 95 now. And I didn't quite always understand what that meant. And I was like, okay, I kind of get what that means. But yeah, it's, we see it with NA and AA. Like, what do people do at AA meetings? They're loaded up with coffee and cigarettes. Everybody's smoking, and they're trading one addiction for another, and you try to trade them for things that are going to get you in less trouble. And every time we do that, there's always going to be a reciprocal amount of improvement in our body chemistry and in our life. It's just the goal though is to try to really bring ourselves back to a natural state where we're not polluting our system anymore, period.
Right. Yeah, sure. I think that when you address the diet, like if you asked Dr. Brian Clement, or you ask Dr. Ellen Goldhammer, they'll tell you that when these people come in and they're put on like, whole food, plant-based or raw, or they start to water fast, the cigarettes and stuff fall away like really easily, because all of a sudden your system becomes like hypersensitive to these things. And a lot of these other, like you said, the drinking triggers the smoking. And when you're starting to just feel healthier and breathe better and stuff, it's definitely more motivating for sure. But I do think that there's something to be said for everyone trying to just overwhelm themselves to a point where they can't really pull it off.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I do this, I bring this concept up a lot, where we talk about how like detox is not an event, it's a continuum. It's it's the lifestyle of it. So a lot of people do Gil Jacobs calls he calls it penthouse to the outhouse. So it's like pristine, then down in the shit again, and then pristine. Right. I call it stock graph dieting. It's like up and down and up and down. Like, people like to be very extreme about things based on their enthusiasm in the moment, and success comes.
Do you think it's that they like that, or do you think that they just feel so bad that they're so motivated, and then all of a sudden they start to feel better and they give themselves a little bit more wiggle room?
I think that one thing that a lot of us don't understand in this culture even in the alternative health culture, even in all the different advanced nutritional philosophies that we see happening on social media and stuff, people don't realize how addicted we are to non-foods. Most of the foods that humans eat, and of course all the extra substances that we create, pharmaceuticals and recreational drugs and all that, but even more so just food, especially processed food, but even things like bread and pasta and things that like just seem like, oh, it's food. Like it's not really food. And our parents ate it and imparted that into our cellular chemistry when we were born. And then we continued to eat that way. And the addiction runs so deep that we struggle with it so hard until you can break that addiction. Mm-hmm. And when you break that addiction, you see it so clearly and you go, holy shit. Like, this is what's going on in the entire world. This is why you got, like my client that just left earlier, like guy in his 50s, like just walking time bomb in regards to dying soon. Like, it was just colon problems, ankles swollen this big, feet stunk, like, like very toxic human. And but like he's in his 50s, he's been trying to break free from it, and you think like, well, why does a grown adult have so much trouble making decisions? Like, don't eat that. There's always this slippery slope of reasons and excuses, and we tell ourselves stories, and then we have enough. I feel so bad, or I don't like the way my body looks, or I don't like the way I'm aging, or so now I'm going to like get this done and I'm going to do it. But if I tried to live the way I live now in the first 10 years of eating clean, I would have struggled so much. I'm not a disciplined person. So I'm big into the transition and enthusiasm part of it. Have fun with it. Like, you should be having fun with all these cleansing foods. Nerd out on the cleansing stuff, but don't get into a depravity situation where you're just eating watermelons and it's exciting for the first half a day. And then you're constantly starving and feeling sick from the detox. And nobody loves that. Nobody wants that. But if you move slowly.
Right. I love that. I would love for you to expand on what you mean by breaking an addiction. And what I mean by that is there's plenty of people like who go to AA who have to accept that they're alcoholics for life. They have to take the steps. And then you have the other side of it where people say you're self-limiting yourself by doing that. You need to tell yourself that you're not addicted and that you can break free from it. I would love to see how you define what you mean by breaking the addiction. Is it that it's no longer there, or is it that you have to keep yourself in check? What do you mean?
There's a couple of layers to this, right? So yes, there's so Dr. Vishy asked me once, he said, Michael, you don't call yourself an alcoholic anymore, right? And I was like, and I kind of knew where he was going. I was like, no, I don't actually do that. And he was like, good, because you don't want to start identifying with something that you're not. Like, don't create an identity around something you're not. You don't drink anymore. You're not an alcoholic, and I feel that way. Like, I could drink now. I won't do it because I value my body and my clarity too much. But like, I could drink now and not fall into anything. Like, I'm so grounded in who I am, what I want for my life. It's not like a concern. It's not like that type of situation. But obviously that path works with alcoholics, like finally admitting that they have a problem and admitting that, but the alcoholic for life thing,
well, I feel as though there's people who are more, there's levels, and there's like a sliding scale of people who are way more addicted to, let's say, alcohol. So I feel as though like Rich Roll, he's one of the examples where he is in that category where he calls himself a former alcoholic and he says it works for him. But then I feel as though there's people who do get kind of trapped, like you're saying, in identifying in that way. So I feel as though they kind of all have their place, but at the same time, you have to kind of look at it honestly, right? Because some people kind of get themselves into that bubble.
Yeah. And I'm sure, there are deeper levels of addiction that like, it's hard for some people that don't have it to understand. They're just like, get your shit together, guy. You're 28, 29, 30, but like they like there's people that just don't have it. They can't. The level of addiction runs on an emotional, psychological level, on a physical level. It's so powerful. So, I don't have every level of addiction that I've ever experienced. I've only my own, which was pretty strong, but I know there's people far deeper than I was. But what I'm talking about is like, I eat a very simple diet these days, like super simple.
Yeah. And we want to know what you eat as well.
Yeah, it's basically I wake up, I drink water, and then I'll either have raw juice or fruits or a fruit smoothie. I post a lot of them on Instagram. People can see it. And then I'll eat some like maybe raw protein bars that I make myself or something in the middle, or some chia seed pudding in the middle of the afternoon. And then I have a salad with either, I don't know, some type of raw food or like guacamole or like avocados or nuts or seeds, or sometimes I'll eat steamed vegetables and baked sweet potatoes. And that's it. And that's all I've eaten for the past 10, 15 years. Before that, I was a little, I used to actually be a natural food chef. So I had a little more, made some more complex food. But that's very satisfying to me, and it's grounding to me, and it actually feels good. There's no discipline around that, like none. Like it's just, that's what I crave. That's what I want. And there's certain things like I don't dabble. So the moment you go back and dabble in something, it reawakens the addictive quality of that food. So I don't go, oh, I'll just have a vegan pizza, on Friday or whatever. Like, I'm not that person. If I do that, like, I'm eating vegan pizza 5 nights a week, Yeah. So like, I never do that. Like, it's out of my chemistry. So there's people walking around, indigenous tribal people somewhere, that aren't craving the frothy Starbucks thing every morning because they've never had it in their lives. They're craving whatever's in their environment and in their food and whatever their families ate and whatever they ate growing up, right? Our body seeks pleasure and grounding with food, but it goes from what's in the cellular memory. Like, I remember how good the pizza from Staten Island was, but I'm not sitting here craving it all day going, I wish I could eat that, but I'm going to eat this broccoli because no, like that would suck. My life would suck. I don't do that. So keeping it out of the chemistry is very important.
But lots of people do that. Well, that's part of the reason why MP, have this podcast, because I think getting educated and learning from other people obviously is super important, but people are being taught to override their natural instincts. Like you're saying, they might be craving something so hard, or your body's saying eat this, but they're like, no, I have to eat like just this broccoli, and I have to tell myself I'm happy with it. And if I'm not, it's because I had problems as a child or something, not because they're just not fueling themselves properly. So I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, it's people feel like they put too much pressure on themselves. It takes a while to get there. You need to remove it from your chemistry and your cellular memory. You need to rebalance the microbiome. So the bacteria in the intestine send signals to the brain telling it what it wants. People that are overly yeasted, oh my God, they can't control the sugar cravings, even though it fucks them up every time. They just can't. And it's like, where does that craving come from? It's really interesting because you think about the human body and the relationship to all these other life forms, and you're like, who's really calling the shots here? Like, is it me that's hungry? Is it, but the microbiome calls for what it's made from. Whatever the ecosystem is nourished with consistently, it'll look for. So like at the end of the night, I really want a salad. I'm not doing it to be good or anything. Like, I really want it. So I broke that addictive process. I have mastery over my desires. I don't have to indulge in things. I still like raw desserts and stuff. Like, I still like good stuff, but, and by the way, I'm not telling people that the goal is to eat super simple. Like, the goal is to be honest with what you want with your life. Like, my wife likes vegan cupcakes and vegan pizza and stuff, like I eat a little different than her. We have different aspirations in regards to what we're trying to do. Yeah. But yeah, breaking that addictive cycle is key. Most people dabble, they never get through it. They never rebalance the microbiome. They never get it out of their cellular memory, and they just keep the cycle going. And then they're really good for a while, and then they break down and they have something. And a lot of the times it's not as simple as like, I ate a vegan pizza. A lot of the times it's like people go hard on some fast food or something that all of a sudden they're on the roller coaster again. So when people get like, oh, wait, I'm in this addictive process, eating non-foods, eating basically drugs. You take flour products, wheat doesn't grow in fields in nature the way that we grow it. They take it, they harvest it, they remove the hulls, they polish it, they powder it down, they ferment it, they bake it into a light, fluffy thing. That's drug refinement. And it actually lights up the same pleasure centers in the brain as different opiates do.
Gotcha. So you would have the, Harley, the During Riders of the world, or possibly even like the John McDougall's. I know most of the plant-based doctors are recommending like whole foods, like whole brown rice and things like that. But, I feel as though they definitely would disagree with that. Now, my personal stance is like, those foods are problematic for me. Like, I don't feel that good on them. But do you think that it's a little bit of a stretch to say that they're non-foods, or do you think that it's just how it is? And people are just completely
flour.
Yeah, like just refining those foods and turning them in a little more processed. Do you think that calling them non-foods is a little bit of a stretch, or do you feel as though like you're just seeing it over and over that these people cannot stop being addicted to this stuff?
Oh no, I'm 100% on that. I'm 100%. When you really think about when we think about what the natural diet for humanity is, we have to go back in the timeline. And what a lot of people are trying to do right now is they're trying to create natural diets based on agrarian culture. And agrarian culture happened way, way, way after humanity had been walking on the planet for over 100,000 years. So everything we ate was in balance with the natural environment. And grains, dairy products, and excess animal fat was not part of any of that equation. Nobody was eating grains. Now I know different, over time, and people go, oh, someone sent me a link on something today and they were talking about ancestral foods. Ancestral foods don't mean anything. When we're thinking about what this system of organs was originally designed to process and eat, we have to go back to before that. We even go back to before fire, even though I do think cooked food is an important thing these days. But technically, raw plants, plants in their raw form without grains and without excess animal foods. A lot of the times when you look at the nutritional philosophies that are popping right now, a lot of fruitarianism, a lot of like, oh, humans are natural frugivores and all this stuff. Like, if we actually look at our ancient relatives and the great apes, right, that connection that we have, and we look at the digestive anatomy and the physiology and the similarities we have, that makes sense that we're plant eaters. They don't eat grains, they don't eat dairy products. None of them are vegan. I mean, there's vegan monkeys, there's fruitarian monkeys, but they're not connected to us the way that the greater primates are. Greater primates always eat a very small percentage of their diets as termites, ants, eggs, raw eggs, some small vertebrates, right? So like they're not even vegan for that matter, but they do eat a lot of plants, and it's mostly leaves and fruit. It's some nuts and seeds, and it's a lot of bark and sprouts and shoots. And then there's that other aspect that nobody wants to talk about. So, that's really where we have to go if we want to understand what our body is meant to be in relationship with as far as a food source. Everything we did with agriculture is just fake. It's cool. It lets us build cities. It lets us make art. It lets me not be hunting and gathering today. But vegan diets and any modern diet is not even possible without agriculture. Yeah. If we had to grow our own food. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you think that most people should be eating vegan, or do you think it's very dependent upon their health or their situation? Do you think it's more of like an ethical issue? Like, kind of what's your stance on being a plant-based person?
I'm actually going to do a video on YouTube about this, and it's going to be like why I continue to eat vegan after 27 years, even though I believe humans are omnivores. I think that we're not going to rewild ourselves. It's just not going to happen. New York City's not going to turn into a hunting foraging situation without demolishing the East Coast in a matter of months, right? Like, that's not going to be a thing. So we're dependent on farming culture now. And it's interesting because it creates an opportunity, right? Like, I would never pass judgment as far as the ethics of killing and eating animals. Obviously, we know the biggest disappointment and the biggest soul murdering sort of thing to observe is like dredge fishing and animal and giant factory farms of cattle and removing babies from mothers, and like we know that, grinding up baby chicks, and like we know that's like the worst of the worst type of stuff that humanity could be doing in regards to animals. But even in regards to like hunting, like I would never, if there's some culture that's an indigenous tribal culture that's living in the jungle, like I'm not gonna, we should never pass judgment on them for surviving and eating meats, sure, and things like that, right? But now that we're not in that, majority of humanity is not in that, it gives us a spiritual opportunity, because now you can go, oh, okay, I could eat a salad with hemp seeds and avocado and chickpeas, or I can take a life and contribute to something that creates suffering, right? So now we have a choice. Once that choice happens, you go, oh, wait a second. Now humanity has a spiritual experience to be more compassionate, because we're not just trying to survive. We're not just trying to like feed our families and stuff, like we can get nutrients from sources that require less suffering and less destruction, and especially since we're in our culture, most people aren't hunter-gatherers, right? So most people are reliant on animal farming, which is the worst of the worst. So being able to make that choice is where the spiritual dilemma comes in for most people. It's not a dilemma for natural tribal people, but it's a dilemma for us city and town people living in an agrarian society.
And you see the pushback on both sides, where people are claiming like, hey, we're fruitarians, we should only eat fruit. Then you have the people over here, we should only eat meat. Then you have like the normal people who are like, hey, I guess they benefit in both sides of it. So like when you're saying that you believe we're omnivores, but you still choose to eat a plant-based diet, do you think that you could obtain some health benefits from eating those animal products, or is it more along the lines of your spiritual pursuits?
Well, here's the thing too. Like when it comes to, like, I have chickens where they're all rescued animals, right? And we have 9 of them now, and they just make egg. I got like 35 eggs in my refrigerator. You know, my wife and my son eat eggs. My son hardly eats eggs, but there's nothing ethically wrong with taking those eggs. They're just coming out, and that's it. Like, they're coming out, and that's it. These chickens the eggs are coming. So if I eat them or not, there's nothing ethically wrong with it. I don't really want to fix what's not broken. And I've been vegan for 27 years. Sure. And when you're vegan for 27 years, especially into cleansing arts, you have to be careful how you introduce foods that are, especially foods that are going to be more mucus forming in the system. So I'd have to be very careful if I introduced eggs or something like that. But from an ethical perspective, like that wouldn't necessarily be a big deal. But when we look at a lot of the, now, by all means, eating purely plants is going to be cleaner through the human body than introducing animal foods. But when you're getting high quality animal foods and eating micro amounts of them, like if I took my diet now and 3 nights a week in my salad, maybe I put a raw egg yolk in one, and then I had a little bit of steamed chicken in another one, and a little grass-fed beef in another one. Like, yes, there's nutrition in there, but any elements of that, any of the waste products in that animal tissue, any excess saturated fat and cholesterol, like it would be neutralized by the rest of my diet, and it would be carried through the system. So it would be when we look at the downside of animal food, a lot of it comes from quality and volume. And most of our food cultures are based in a volume of way too much animal food. So I really had this realization when I started working as a colonic therapist, and I would look at, I had a little overlap when I was a chef and the colonic therapist, and I would watch all these pale, puffy, fat vegans, like eating, tofu, cheesecake and croissants and drinking coffee with packaged coconut milk. And then I had clients that were like athletes, like triathletes, and they ate like lots of plants, and they would eat some steamed chicken and stuff. And they were in phenomenal shape and healthy. They were so much healthier than the vegans. So, animal protein in small amounts actually isn't that bad for someone if they're eating enough plants to neutralize and assist it. It's something that has to be balanced. And that's why when you see the great apes, they're eating insects and like maybe small animals that it makes up like 4% of their diet. 96% of the diet is fruits, green leaves, roots, shoots, bark, So it really depends on what you're eating it in relationship to.
Gotcha. So do you think that there's people out there, because I'm sure you as well see all the people coming and going from veganism or raw veganism back to animal products. Do you think it's just because maybe they were a little extreme? Do you think there's genuinely some people who really needed it, or maybe their guts were so messed up they couldn't handle the fiber? So when they put in this, easily absorbed, highly dense fat, that they maybe just went from calorie restriction or some type of starvation type issue, and now they're getting some food, they feel better. Do you come down anywhere on that?
The number one issue I see people having is that they don't understand the process of detoxification, and they think that them being skinny and not feeling well is the result of a vegan diet, and not that they're in a process of a vegan diet. I did not look well in the beginning. I was much lighter than I am now. I ate much more food. I wasn't feeling well all the time. I was telling you, fevers and body aches and but Dr. Fred Bishy said, don't try to cure the cure. You're in the cure right now. This is your body retracing, breaking down, releasing endogenous waste and breaking down inferior tissue. And now you're eating all of this great, rich, organic food. You stay with it, you come out better on the other side. And then Gil Jacobs next leveled it. He was the colonic therapist I first started working with. He's been on my podcast before. And he's like, you have to open up your channels of elimination to get through this process of deep detoxification so you can come out feeling better on the other side.
Right.
And,
so for the people out there listening, I feel as though there's a lot of people who are willing to wait and be patient and push through, but sometimes they feel as though they're declining, their weight is down, but as they're staying patient, they're just getting thinner and thinner, and they're putting themselves more in a tight spot. Do you think that that's because they're not addressing specific issues for them? Or do you think that it is a patience game and eventually you're just going to come out the other side?
Well, I do believe that there's a certain amount of people that do need some animal protein in their diet, because I've seen it clinically. But a lot of those people are not actually doing the work. They're not on the colonic table opening up the bowels. They're not doing liver flushes. They're not deep sweating. They're not actually helping that toxicity release from the tissue. They're not like actively doing it. They're just
Okay.
eating that way and then just waiting for stuff to happen. And they're never really coming out on the other side, or it's taking way long for it to happen. And people panic early and they have a short-term memory. They're like, oh, I feel this way for the past 2 years, but for the last 32 years, I was formula fed. I smoked cigarettes. I ate garbage. I ate, pus-filled dairy products from pizzerias with gluten, white flour. Like, they forget they built their entire body on this, and they came from the tissue quality of their parents.
Mm-hmm.
Right. They forget they're like, oh, this might be a little bit of a process. Now, there's some people that and people tend to go off the deep end. So like, really what people need to do is maintain their 95% plant-based diet. And then if they feel better introducing animal protein, then do that in a clean way, high quality animal protein, small amounts in the plant-based diet. Then you're cleansing and fortifying with the animal food, because animal food is very nutritionally dense. Now, it comes at a cost if you eat too much of it, right? But
sure.
And we know that. We see it in all the studies and everything. Like, we know that too much animal food's a problem.
That's why I love what you said about the continuum. As Doug Lau talks about like health being a continuum, but he also says like, even though we can assimilate the calories from animal products, it's still the fact that the plants burn a little cleaner. So, there's one thing if you have no other options, right? But if you can burn stuff a little cleaner and feel a little better, you can go a little longer. And at least that's the way that he speaks about it. But I'm curious because there's a lot of different types of people talking about detox. You have, the raw vegans, fruitarians, you have Robert Morse's camp, you have Lou Corona, Dan McDonald, all these types of things. Did you learn from any of those types of figures specifically, or did you kind of come through with all of these other people that you're mentioning?
Everybody has great things to contribute, and everybody disagrees a little bit. I even disagree with my mentors, people that are decades older than me. Just based on my own experience. But no, the two primary people, say four, Malcolm X in regards to self-responsibility and taking charge of your life, John Robbins in regards to the introduction to the understanding of toxicity in the food supply, and then Dr. Fred Bishey, brilliant clinical nutritionist who is the oldest living raw foodist in the Western world. He's done intensive fasting. He's seen like over 50,000 clients, right? He really taught me a lot. And then Gil Jacobs, for me, getting me to focus on elimination being 80% of it. And there's something really interesting, and I don't always talk about this, only in certain crowds. The cleaner the chemistry, the less calories and the less food you need to function. So people don't get that. They sometimes, like at my office, like I'll be buzzing like this all day. I've ate nothing, but maybe I had a little bit of green juice or something like that. And they're just like, I don't like, what the fuck's going on? I don't understand that. And I was like, I was never like that. But now, and even Malcolm X used to talk about this. He's like, I get mentally dull if I eat too much. So his wife was always like, when he was out on the road and he was giving these huge speeches and meeting with the congregation from the Nation of Islam, doing all these things, his wife was like, Malcolm, make sure you eat. Because he would get really skinny, but he's like, I can't eat. It makes me mentally dull. I need my energy, because food would detract from the energy. When you have a clean chemistry, I don't know. And, by the way, the Nation of Islam and Malcolm, they didn't do like radical vegan stuff, but they have books that they wrote, How to Eat to Live 1 and How to Eat to Live 2 from Elijah Muhammad. And I'm not saying everything in these books is factual or whatever, but there was a version of like, 1940s, 50s, 60s health food in there, eating lamb, eating whole grains, eating vegetables, so they were like much cleaner than the standard Americans. So like their bodies probably communicated to them more what was actually going on. And, he knew if he overate or if he ate before something, it would actually take vitality away from him. Where people that are into cleansing work and have gone deep into it, we're just vibing on the emptiness,
right?
Because we're not putting.
It feels as though it becomes really tricky because, me speaking out of my personal experience, I've been what you're talking about right now, where it's like you've been having juices all day or green juice or things. I love the green juice. I actually love the Purium if that's what you're drinking. I'm
drinking one of those now. Yeah.
It tastes amazing. I mean, I go through the whole container in like 3 days, so I can't buy it because it's too expensive.
Same.
I've been over MPs like putting like 50 scoops in. But and there's been periods where I actually gained weight. I was doing like green juice all day in a salad. I what's that, 1,200 calories, and I gained 15 pounds back in 2 years ago or something. But just one other example, I was doing Robert Morse's stuff, detoxing, and feeling really good. It was probably the best I felt in a really long time. And for Thanksgiving, I was with my ex. We're going to do a vegan Thanksgiving. I went hard. I binge ate, right? And I binge ate for 6 weeks. I didn't put any weight on, even though I went from 2,000 calories of fruit to like 6,000 calories of vegan, whatever. I didn't put on any weight. But then when I went back and finally recommitted to what was working before, I went down to 115 pounds. And it's really tough to think of. It's really hard for me to conceptualize, like, was it just the detox? Was it all the fermentation now? Because I was peeing 50 times a day. And it can be so tricky because we might be on a path where we know that is good, right? And we believe in, but then all of a sudden life comes into play and maybe fitness gets a little more intense, or you have a family, like you had a child. I don't know if that affected your eating habits, or they were so like, ingrained in you that they didn't affect you. But that's where I really, really struggle with interpreting what should be kind of like listening more to my body. I'm getting better at it, but at the same time, it feels kind of tricky. I'm sure everyone out there can relate to that.
Fasting really helps for you to listen to your body, because your body will communicate to you when a food does not serve you anymore. But I get what you're saying too. Like, there's a certain thing that happens, especially with pregnant and breastfeeding women that have been vegan their whole lives. And now they're like, oh my God, my body, I just need some type of animal protein. They usually go for like bone broth or like egg yolks or something like that, or eggs. I don't argue with them against that. I go, okay, right. Listen to your body. We're going to keep the juicing high. We're going to keep the hydration high. We'll continue doing the treatments, the colonic sometimes. We're going to keep the channels of elimination open, and then fortify yourself with whatever you think is best. Now, there's plenty of vegan women that do vegan pregnancies and breastfeeding too.
Sure.
But yeah, by the way, the fitness thing is, a lot of that too on vegan diets is sort of, it's almost fake. Meaning that, like, even if you look at someone who I love, Derek Simnet, who's a fantastic like vegan bodybuilder, he takes protein powder, right. In addition to like the protein complexes in the food that he eats, he does take a protein powder. So if you're trying to stack muscle, you're going to need to go outside the box a little bit. You're going to need to go outside the box.
Yeah, I mean,
for sure.
I'm in that camp. Like, I'll add some of this stuff in because I'm trying to, maintain some weight and muscle mass. I think they're great. I think that, I think in the vegan world, and especially in the high carb vegan world, everyone's scared of some amino acids and some fat. And I felt like I seen so much benefit from having that, especially when my body fat was so low. Like right now I'm 7% body fat, and that's with like barely any training. I work out a few times a week, but back when I was like down to 4, like I was sick. And I would, like you said, like the pregnant breastfeeding women, all I looked at was meat. I was still vegan. I didn't eat it, but I was still like craving that intensely. And if I thought about a piece of fruit, I was like, I would rather eat anything else on earth because my body fat was so low,
Well, the fruitarian diet is pure fantasy anyway. That's a fantasy diet. I mean, but we've known that since the 90s. Like I was taught that by Dr. Fred Bishey in the 90s. So then as like, and we knew that for years. And everybody that tried to do pure fruitarianism always failed. They would get brittle bones that you can't, like, the cleansing would be so reactive. They would always look like a bunch of toothpicks. Like, and I see some of these guys now, here's the thing. They're clean. Right. Anorexics are clean. Anorexics are clean because they undereat. They're not healthy, but they have a cleaner chemistry. Right. That's why anorexics have a lot of them have a hard time with the refeeding process when they finally get hospitalized or get help. If you're not very careful, it's like breaking a fast. You can't just dump extra dense calories, fats, proteins into a clean system. Your body lets you know immediately. Yeah. Refeeding. I mean,
I've experienced that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So the fruitarians, like I look at some of them and like you see clear faces and clear skin and I go, yeah, it's super healthy people living this idealistic lifestyle. And I'm like, I hope that dude never has to protect his family from anybody because dude is like a toothpick over here. I mean, it's great that he's a sweet young hippie kid, but like we're also males, so we want to strip down at times. We want to cleanse, but we want to maintain testosterone. We want to be able to stack some degree of muscle, not the fake idea of muscle that we see on bodybuilders that are eating 10 steaks a day and whey protein. And that's also a manipulation. But we want to be strong in our male energy, and you need fortification with that. So the key is to cleanse, to eat enough cleansing foods where we're intermittent fasting, hydrating, sweating, shitting, pissing, keeping things moving, and then eat a fortifying food to the cleanest of our ability. What's the fortifying food? For me, it's hemp seeds, nuts and seeds. I eat some sweet, some cooked food, sweet potatoes. Like that's kind of where I'm at right now. Other people, it's like tofu and beans and quinoa in those forms. And then other people, they want to eat a little bit of animal protein, but you got to keep the 80 to 90% of the diet, clean and encouraging elimination. That's the magic formula. It actually doesn't
buy
matter
into the kidney filtration and stuff. Is that part of the protocols? No.
And I have an online teaching. I have an online teaching platform, and now my mind could be changed on this, but I've thought deeply about this. I have an online teaching platform, and there's one course. It's our signature course. It's called Eliminating the Toxic Load. And it's if people are interested, they can go to everydaydetoxacademy.com. And there's, I think I'll tell you what the coupon codes are. I think we have a few left. I don't know if there'll be any left by the time this airs, but maybe I'll make more for you guys if people are interested, really interested in it. But I talk about this, and when I look at everything I understand about the organs and diet and the kidneys, first of all, everything I know about health food culture, right? Immediately someone that feels fine reads something or hears something, and then suddenly they have a problem. The people started hitting me up with this. I didn't know this was a thing. And then suddenly people were like, hey, so, I have all these questions. And you had said, MP, I try to talk to as many people as I can on Instagram. And I try my best. It's actually getting a little difficult right now because sometimes I can do up to 1,000 exchanges in a day. And I'm trying to keep the community, give as much value as I can, but it gets a little tough, especially when 5, 6, 7 paragraphs, or even worse, 5, 6, 7 voicemails a minute long. And I'm like, I don't have 2.5 hours to sit and listen to people talk all day.
Michael, I have one quick story. I got home one night because MP and I were always voice memo people, and there's a few other people I'd share voice memos with. I get home one night, this woman sends me 108 voice memos. I counted them out, and I'm like, are you? And the worst part was, I'm like, all right, I'm going to bite the bullet. I start listening and responding with voice memos, and she starts responding to those as I'm doing it. I'm like, no, fuck this.
All the time. I answer someone's question and I'm going to exit to go to the next person, and the bubbles come up. They're already responding. And I'm like, oh, they're going to say thank you or thanks. No, it's like, thanks, but here's my next one. And I'm just like, one thing to realize is that a lot of people don't value their own time, and they don't realize that, and it's part of it. I invite it. I'm like, come on, let me be helpful to you.
In Corona times, if everyone was off from work, sitting at home, just wanting to message you, probably.
And then you have a cute little baby, and you get more messages, and that was a tough couple of days trying to get back to everybody on that one too. But yeah, we had a lot of messages. I've contemplated shutting down messaging, but I don't want to shut down the communication with everybody in the community. But it's just and a lot of it is nonsense stuff too. So for example, people come in, message, blah, 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 I got this problem, I got this problem, can you help me out? And I look at it and they're like, I know my kidneys aren't filtering. And at first they just kind of they got me. And I was like, and I was like, oh, so I was like, what was your glomerular filtration rate? When was your diagnosis? And they're like, oh no, I just read on Dr. Whoever's website that that if it wasn't cloud, so they're self-diagnosing themselves with nothing. With absolutely nothing. Now, when somebody's kidneys aren't filtering, there's reasons why, right? There's bacterial infections. There's disease states. And you can just go to the doctor and have your filtration rate, your glomerular filtration rate read, and they'll tell you to what degree your kidneys are filtering. So I'm listening to this and I'm like, okay, so you basically have nothing. And I start going onto the Facebook group and I'm trying to understand what's going on. And I see the pictures of I started taking all of these herbs and I started upping my fruit, because the answer in that community is always fruit. And by the way, no offense to the practitioner or whatever. I think he's kind of cool. He just did a video with Dr. Fred Bishy. I like him. I think he's a cool dude. It's just on this thing, I don't quite understand it. Maybe someone will change my mind, but from everything I've heard, nothing's changed my mind yet. Very interesting thing. What's the answer to get your kidneys to filter? And nobody experiences anything outside of, meaning they're not having kidney issues, right? Outside of the fact that they're looking at their piss and it's not cloudy, which makes them think that all this stuff is left in the bloodstream. So the answer is almost always, especially in the comments section, and I believe this is part of the protocol, is to up your fruit intake, because fruit acids and fruit sugar helps to detoxify the blood. One of the places we see cloudy urine is in diabetics. When you have excess sugar in your blood, your urine can start to turn cloudy. And I'm watching people pound fruit sugar, and I know they're not at the athletic potential, that they're burning all this fruit sugar. And then they're taking all sorts of herbs, and the urine is turning cloudy, and they're like, I did it. And I'm thinking, what did you do though? Did you just turn your urine cloudy from excess sugar, or was your body flushing something from the herbs? Because I've seen it in the work that I do. Do I have a sample? Do I have a book here? Hang on one sec.
His office seems really cool. I want to go visit there.
It's probably super quiet, just like I've been.
What are you guys laughing about? My enthusiasm?
Yeah,
of course.
I guess I'll find out on the replay. So one of the things that I learned about was this. Now, for people that are just listening and not watching, that's mucoid plaque, or what they call it. And you see this in the old cleansing literature. This is Dr. Bernard Jensen's Guide to Better Bowel Care. It's like a really old, antiquated book. But what a lot of people mistakenly think is they think that all of this stuff lives in their intestine. What 90% of what we're looking at is psyllium husk and bentonite clay that has moved through, taking the shape of the intestine. And yes, it can be used therapeutically to unclog waste and remove waste out of the pockets of the intestine, but that's not what it is. But in the health food community, most people don't understand the body. They don't know anatomy. They don't know physiology. They see things in videos online or read some book, and they go, I know that I got to get this stuff out of my body, but they don't actually know how it exists or how we do it. And I think that's what's going on with the kidney thing, because
I would love. So when you say that people are getting, the cloudiness from the sugar, my experience was the exact opposite. When I would have a lot of sugar, and especially in excess, and I wasn't, feeling well, I would piss so much, and it was so clear, and it's almost as if I had nothing to it. It's like water coming out of me. So it's interesting that you say that, because I would think that when I'm fermenting, eating the sugar and pissing 30 times in a day, that I would have seen cloudiness, but it was the opposite.
Well, you have to drink a lot. You have to have a lot of fruit sugar to start to see cloudiness, right? You would have to really be overwhelming your blood with it. But I'm wondering if there's something in the herbs that's causing that to happen as well. Because when we eat things like daikon radish or radish greens, mustard greens, like when you eat foods like that, you'll immediately feel a little burn in your urine, and you see a cloudiness with that as well. So a lot of the times what we're doing, and we see this, I've seen this for years in detoxification protocols, where people, especially with parasite cleanses, where people are taking irritating herbs and they're getting reactions from taking the herbs, and they think that they're cleansing or killing parasites, but they're actually causing intestinal disruption. And, we see this with herbs. We see it with different foods. Asparagus, you eat asparagus and you smell it in your piss immediately. But beets, especially if you roast the beets, you get a magenta colored piss. Right.
Right. I scared the shit out of myself before. I made a rich roll smoothie with beets in it. I go to the bathroom. I think I'm pissing blood. I'm like,
yeah, a lot of people do.
Scared the crap out of me.
So, not that these are all good foods, and that's okay. That means your kidneys are functioning great. They're releasing something, but there's certain things, and particularly herbs, that can irritate the intestines, and they could also come out through the urine. And I'm wondering, I've not done that herbal protocol, but I have to wonder, because the way to really support the kidneys, it's A, to hydrate, and B, to make sure you're having a lot of citrates, foods that contain citrates. So it's like fruits, and just the kidneys are almost take care of themselves. Now, can a 55-year-old guy that drank tons of alcohol and coffee and ate a lot of animal protein, can he have kidneys that are suffering and potentially have kidney stones? Yeah, without a doubt. But for the 25-year-old young fruitarian or vegan kid that thinks their kidneys aren't filtering because it's not cloudy, I've never seen that without manipulation in my entire career. 21 years I've been a therapist working with people with all sorts of clients. I've never seen it, and I've never gotten a good explanation as to what's actually going on there.
Well, one day we would love to have you come back on, because there's certain topics where I feel like we could do a whole podcast on, whether it's cleaning out the bowels or kidney filtration. But I did want to ask you, like, if you have someone who's coming to you, let's say they're around, anywhere from 25 to 35, they're feeling not well. Maybe they have some weight issues with putting on weight or losing some weight. If you're kind of guiding someone, what are some of the first things you're looking for or addressing right off the bat to try to get them to start feeling better? And does it usually is it usually a huge, long process, or is it usually like a spiral up because the habits start to compound and the positive effects?
It depends on how committed they are and how enthusiastic. As Dr. Bishop used to always tell me, he's like, your clients, to get success, your clients have to be participants in their own recovery. So they can't be like, getting pulled along by the wife who's into health food. And now they're getting a colonic and they're being nice enough because they're good people, but they're never going to do the things you tell them, right? But the first thing we do is we look at the morning. What's the morning look like? The morning tells us how toxic somebody's chemistry is, mostly. Meaning the bacon and eggs culture, the I need a cream cheese and a bagel culture, the I need coffee culture. That's usually showing us how toxic their diet and lifestyle is based on what's going on in the sleep cycle and what they're waking up with. So we always want to start with the morning for cleansing. So if somebody's just starting out and they don't want to go too fast, but they want to start making powerful moves, you wake up in the morning, you drink 16 to 32 ounces of water right off the bat. That's it. Sometimes we might give them some things to help, depending on what's going on with them, like some different systemic enzymes or something in the morning, but let's just say water. Next thing that goes in the body is always raw juice or fresh fruits or a fresh fruit smoothie, right? Doesn't always have to be sugar, could be a green juice or whatever, but that's always the first thing when they feel like they need food. And then after that, for some people, they need something a little more grounding and heavier. And that's when we start looking at the oatmeal or some dried fruits and nuts or like a vegan protein bar or something like that, depending on what they need. And then we start replacing every meal with 60 to 80% raw salads and steamed vegetables. So that's the base of every meal. And it doesn't matter. Like there's a guy and his name is Pat the Plumber. When I met him, he built my first professional colonic studio, because we used to do them illegally out of apartments for years. Gil still does, like he doesn't like formalities in law. So my first professional one, I hired these guys. His name is Pat, and he's been on my podcast, and he was on my first radio show, like pre-podcast days. And Pat was 465 pounds when he walked out of the car, and he would be like, every few cars, he would like lean and be like, Mike, you can go ahead without me. I gotta take a breath here. And I was like, fuck, this guy's fucked up. And then he came in, and like, he's from Staten Island. So of course, like within 5 minutes, we're best friends. And over the course of 6 weeks of building out all the plumbing on all my units, and we built out a whole space, like 2 floors and everything. This is what I did. He's like, look, I want to do what you guys do. And I was like, I know he's going to crash and burn. At one point, Dr. Bishop tried to bring him through a juice fast. He crashed and burned. We did a whole radio show on it. But but this is what he did. Now, he was 465 pounds. And he would hang out with us and drink juices all day. Like this is powder and water, but like he would drink like raw juices with us from the juice bar all day. Then he would go home. And this is a guy that would order food from 2 different pizzerias. And now Pat's backstory, by the way, is that he was such an addict: cocaine, cannabis, alcohol, cigarettes. Like he gave up all the stuff. I think he used heroin. Like he gave up everything, and food was his last thing because we're always replacing, right? So Pat used to eat pork rinds, drink Crystal Light, and then go home and order from 2 or 3 different pizzerias because he was embarrassed with the volume of food he would order from each one. And he's like, I know when the guy looks at me, like he knows it's all for me. So I'll just order from 3 different places. And he's like, so that was his like comfort at night, divorced guy, So Pat would do that, and then he would drink juice all day, and then he would go home and he would get like non-organic plastic bag salad greens from the supermarket. He would get a bunch of vegetables, non-organic, and just steam them up. And he would put some garbage dressing on it. He didn't make the special raw food stuff I told him to make, just didn't do it. Got some like supermarket, like bad oils, bad vinegar, bad salt, kind of, not health food, but like whatever. Put it all over that, ate it. And then he would eat fried chicken wings or pizza or something like that. It was the first time he ever went from 400. It was the first time since going above 400 that he went below it. And he went to 385. So 465 to 385, got off of his sleep apnea mask, so massive improvement, but he wasn't doing anything close to perfect. But those were the first steps. Now, if Pat would have been like hard on this and really loved it and gotten through, like he would have been going into like, okay, now at night, I'm doing the salads and the vegetables and like hopefully elevating to organic. But then he'd be eating macro bowls. He'd be eating quinoa and black beans and whatever, or like, vegan pizza on a night where he's not doing all whole foods or whatever. Like, so he would have moved in that direction, but we always start with that. But his morning was the most important part. So no more pork rinds, no more like, fatty, gross stuff in the morning. It's all about hydration and flushing in the morning. And we start there.
Was he getting onto the colonics and things like that, or incorporating any exercise, or is he a little too heavy for that?
Too heavy for exercise, too out of it for the exercise. He wanted to do colonics, but my table had a weight limit. I think it was 350 pounds at the time. Now I custom build the table, so put anybody on there. But yeah, at the time, Pat couldn't get on the table. And honestly, I didn't want to give him a colonic. There's a certain point where body work isn't that great. Like you don't get the results. You need accessibility. You need to open this stuff up, and you need to shed weight and to be able to do that. Now I give heavy people colonics all the time, but it's a lot easier when someone has a lot of the padding off of them, because then I could really get in there and work on different trigger points and do stuff. But sometimes we try, but Pat was way heavy. And I've had people that are like just as heavy as Pat, 450 pounds, come into the office. And I just look at them and I go, you know what? I say, just sit down. We're not doing a treatment today. And I give them a full-on nutritional consultation for an hour and a half. I don't charge them a penny. And I go, I want you to do these things. And then I want you to come back to me in like 3 or 4 months. I was like, do these first and see what happens. Call me with any questions. And I usually just start it with that, because if I put them on the table, it's not going to be that good. They're just going to be giving me money for not a lot of results. And it's going to be uncomfortable for them, most likely. Yeah.
I would have thought it would have been the other way around. Like they would have needed it more than someone who's maybe a little thinner, but still toxic or something.
And you'll be amazed at the volume that little people hold on to in their intestines. Everything basically from the rib cage down to the groin is intestine. The kidneys are up in the back, the stomach is up under the ribs, the liver's up under the ribs, the bladder and the uterus and everything, in women, like it's very small compared to like all this intestine. And when the wrong things go in there, even small people hold on to a ton. It's incredible.
My whole life I was eating like ridiculous amounts of foods, but I was constipated. So I mean, I tend to believe it, but is it that it's interstitial? Because you'll have these doctors say that they cut people open for a living, and they'll open the intestines and they're like, where's all this mucoid plaque that people are talking about? Do you think that it's like some of this stuff is like in the walls of the intestines themselves? Or are you saying that you believe that they're actually like in the colon and kind of like clogging up, basically how like saturated fat can clog an artery? Is it similar to that?
It happens in the macro and it happens in the micro. So it's the clogged arteries, it's the fatty liver, it's the congested gallbladder, and it's the coated colon as well. But here's the thing. So depending on the physical ability of the colon, depending on the mucus response of the colon, depending on what all the individuals are actually eating. Like, so when you look, and by the way, Dr. Hiromi Shinya invented the colonoscope. So the colonoscope is the instrument they use to look up the backside without cutting the abdomen open. Before that, they used to cut everybody's abdomen open just to look. And then he invented the colonoscope, and he was the first person to remove cancer from the bowel without having to do an open abdomen surgery. He just went up there, they have a snare, he was able to grab it, he was able to cauterize it, pull it out, right? And he's done over 300,000 of them in his career. And he's up in, I think he's close to 100 years old now. He's not practicing anymore, but his clinics are still there. And that sounds like a big number, and it took me a while to wrap my head around it. And then I talked to somebody that explained to me that when they do colonoscopies, they don't do any of the prep. They walk into a room, they do the colonoscopy, they're out in 10 minutes. So like they can do like tons of them a day. They have an entire support staff of nurses and techs that prepare the patients. So that's how he got so many done. I have videos on YouTube where I go through his colonoscopy footage. And he shows the different relationship between residue left in the intestine and disease states and the diets that created them. And it's all the stuff that we know. It's dairy products, excess animal fats, and alcohol, like wine drinking, stuff like that. But when some doctors do colonoscopies and they say, oh, everything looks good, there's nothing up on the walls of your intestine, they're right, because the laxative blew everything through. And when you look at Dr. Shinya's colonoscopy footage, some people are so jammed up though. There's pockets of shit everywhere. There's black tar all over the intestine. Like it's right there. When I used to look at Like I'm looking up here because I have all my books up here, but I used to look at books where like there was books like this where there would be like sketches and stuff. And I'm like, okay, get it intellectually. I see it on the colonics table, but like, is this real? You know, is this like really a thing? And then Dr. Shinya's colonoscopy footage hit YouTube, and I was like, boom, there it is. Now, not everybody has that level of smearing sticky impaction on the wall when they take the mineral salts and blow their bowels out. But what we have to understand is that when we're looking at somebody's colonoscopy, we're not looking at what their bowel looks like. We're looking at it on the best day of their life. It's the emptiest it's ever going to be. And normally what they have is they have an accumulation of all that food sitting in the gut, decomposing, letting off waste gases, moving up into the bloodstream and polluting the tissue. And also, depending on what they eat, the microbiome is polluted and is auto-intoxicating them. So, you know, when a GI doc looks and they go like, oh, it all looks clean and everything's great, they're not looking at what the actual conditions are. What they want to see is through the colonic tube. They want to see that waste break free, leave streaks all over the place, come out all tight and impacted with bubbles and waste. A lot of times we see what we call Guinness coming out of the tube. It's all fermentation. It's all just yeast, just fermenting everything in the intestine. What's going on in that chamber of the intestine is affecting the bloodstream and the tissue quality as a whole. So when we get off the table, sinuses clear up, eyesight sharpens up, skin inflammation drops down. And you see how what's happening in the gut affects things systemically. So it's a matrix of toxicity that's moving through the body. I hope I answered your question.
Oh yeah, it was beautiful. Thank you. Do you know who Dan McDonald is? The life regenerator? Yeah, so he's a good friend of mine, and he always tells this story where he sees people like transform with a colonic, where their face will completely change because they've been so congested. Now, my personal experience, when I've done my first enema, I went from eating like raw food and I ate a bunch of cooked food, and my legs kind of like blew up. Like all the pressure went to my legs, and they kind of swelled a little bit, well, significantly actually. And I was pretty worried and scared. And I ended up doing an enema, and like a lot of things come out, and my legs went back to normal. So I'm sure that you have seen some pretty intense stuff. Like, does anything come to mind, an example of something pretty cool that you've seen happen?
Oh yeah, I mean, like, well, I'm so glad you're telling this, because here's what happens when we get into cleansing diets. A lot of the time, if we are successful, if our body adapts to what we're doing. This is why breaking fast or you have to transition out of ultra clean diets as well. This is why anorexics, you can't just dump a bunch of calories in their body. Their tissue is too clean. Their cell structure is contracted. When the body's in a contracted, clean state, it needs to slowly accommodate waste again. The reason we do it so well in our culture is because it starts with the tissue quality of our parents. And then what happens when we're sick? Yes, our immune system is like getting training, in the world, but ear infections, colds, chest infection, like we're constantly getting all these mucus responses. That's food. Like we even clear up that stuff sometimes by changing the diet of the mother who's breastfeeding. We get them off dairy and wheat and stuff, and then the kids' ear infections and snotty noses go away, right? So we're always accommodating waste. This is like why human beings are spiritual beings. In the regular world, the temperature changes 1 degree, and there's a whole chain reaction of species extinction because of the fragility in a lot of natural systems. Human beings can pollute themselves for 45 years, have a change of heart, and then live for another 45 years. But we're always accommodating waste, and our body's able to sort of handle it, deal with it. So when we go backwards, juice fast, I eat a raw diet for a long time, and then you try to go back, your body goes, no, what's this? Like when I was young, I wanted to smoke cigarettes so bad because I wanted to look cool in front of the girls or whatever. And I used to get massive headaches. I used to get all this congestion in my chest. I used to cough up yellow and orange and little blood streaks. And then it all went away one day. The headache stopped, and I was like, fuck yeah, I could smoke now. Like my body's acclimated to this. I didn't know what was going on. I just knew that the symptoms stopped. But eventually the body stops fighting and it starts acclimating. And then it hits a saturation point. So when we go backwards, the edema in the legs, that almost killed Dr. Fred Bishop after he broke a water fast improperly like 40 years ago. The reactivity that your body has to true toxicity is fascinating. I make my son like oatmeal and stuff, and it's all like good stuff. It's like oats and some crushed walnuts and some flax and chia seeds, and I put a little bit of like raw walnut milk in it and a little maple syrup. But sometimes I want to see like, is this too sweet? So I taste it on my tongue and I spit it out. Just from touching my mouth and spitting, immediately I'm like, my wife's always like, oh, you're being so gross. What are you doing? I'm just mucus everywhere. I'm just spitting in the sink, spitting it out. Because immediately my body's like, no. What is this disgusting thing that you just put in? Like, don't eat that. Like, it's already having that response. And if I ate it, we call it pumpkin head in the colonic business. A lot of times people eat the wrong thing. They step out of the parameters of their clean diet and they get the congested, heavy, headachy, like it feels like you have a pumpkin on your head. And then with some colonics and nose blowing and hydration, it clears. But yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. And that could actually be destructive. People have died breaking water fasts the wrong way because they reintroduced food the wrong way.
Well, I wasn't even water fasting. I was eating like raw for maybe like 3 or 4 months. And then it just came to the point where my results weren't that good. I was really skinny and upset. And my ex was like, I'll buy you whatever food you want to eat. Like, let's go get some weight on you, basically. So I went and had some vegan sushi. And then we went to a ramen place and ate ramen noodles. And like my legs like doubled up.
There you go. It was the bad salt, because I guaranteed they weren't using Celtic raw sea salt, right? And they were probably using all sorts of fermented, they're not naturally fermented soy. They were probably using like some type of commercial, like Kikkoman or something like that, or some equivalent. And yeah, if you haven't had that in your system, your body lets you know immediately. Like if I had a cigarette today, I'd be screwed. Whenever somebody paints a room or they burn stuff or whatever, like I'm fucked. Like my nose, my sign, like
I'm the same.
It lets me know right away.
The worst is the car air fresh. Those little things, those trees that hang in the car. That is worse than like gas. I had my mom. She ran out of gas like a couple of months ago, and I had to go fill up, her gas tank, and some of it leaked onto the can. It was in my trunk, and it smelled so strong, right? And I picked my cousin up, and she's like, oh my God, like I had a headache the next day after that. And the thing is, she has like 4 air freshener, like of the car ones in her car. I can't even get in her car, but like the gas doesn't even bother me as much as stuff like that. Like that stuff destroys me, dude. I relate. I can't deal with that.
Chemical toxicity. A well-functioning system lets you know it's toxic, but you don't want to become too clean for the world. There's some people that over cleanse, honestly, and they get too clean. And this is why we don't raise raw babies either.
Right. Well, that's what Dan McDonald, my first interaction with him was because I was in that state that I'm talking about. And he's like, dude, you live in New Jersey. You're trying to eat this like tropical diet, low fat, breathing in all the chemicals. Like, the fuck you doing, dude? You need some fat. And I had like no testosterone at all. Right.
Yeah.
And it was really a light bulb moment and really helpful to me. But, oh man, I feel as I want to be definitely respectful of your time. We've gone over definitely over an hour here, but I could truly talk to you for the next couple hours for sure.
You guys are so patient. I looked at the time and I was like, well, I screwed up their hour-long podcast.
I forgot about the time. I was having a ball, but MP hasn't said anything in a while.
I know.
MP, did you want to speak up a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of questions. No, actually, I do just have one question, and then we can wrap it up here. Do you focus on calories at all, or do you really more focus on just like how you feel and what you're putting in your body?
Yeah, and RDAs and nutrients and calories, they're only ballpark. You're never going to know. Like, no one's really going to know. Like, you get an apple, you don't know how many carbohydrates are really in that apple. It all depends on how it was ripened, and like, you don't know how much vitamin C in it. It depends on how when they harvested it, did they nourish the soil right? So it's all kind of ballpark. Like, all right, we know fruits have vitamin C. We know which ones are higher than others, but like, we're never going to like zero down. We know we know that certain foods are more calorically dense than others, but like, we're never going to really. So I go all on feeling, and I check in with my body. It all depends on my fitness schedule as well. And like, so right now, I don't sleep a lot. I sleep maybe 4 hours a night. I just started sleeping like 6 hours a night. I'm super psyched for like 2 years. And when you're in your 40s, my clean diet is saving me. Let me put it that way. But like, I've aged more in the last 2 years from toddler life and not sleeping, than I have in my entire life, even through times of stress and business and stuff like that. So, I tend to eat less. But definitely once I start, you have to eat enough calories to stack some muscle, and I'm never going to look like Derek Simnett or Arnold Schwarzenegger or something. I just not the kind of diet I eat, but I can put on another 25 pounds of muscle. I've done it, easily from training. And yeah, I'll eat a little bit more, for sure. But I don't think about the calories. I just go, I need something grounding. So, I just go for that. I make sure I have something a little bit more grounding than just like banana ice cream for dinner.
Nice.
But that's great. But when I'm not sleeping and I just need energy, like that endurance athlete kind of diet, like carbohydrates like that are good.
Right.
They work good. But yeah, but definitely more fat, more protein, always balanced out with lots of raw plant foods, really only for one or two of the meals of the day, never start a day with fat and protein, right? So, but yeah, so I don't worry about calories. But I noticed something really interesting. Like I noticed how you eat, and I know that you're into fitness. You're working out all the time, right? I noticed. Do you guys know who Ted Carr is?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so Ted Carr, he's I knew it was going to happen. I looked at first. I hadn't seen his account forever, and then I looked at him and I was like, "Oh shit!" I was like, "This dude is fucking stacked now." I was like, "Ted Carr's looking good. He's been working out, but he's a fruitarian." So I was like, "He's going to hit a wall, and he's going to go to cooked food." And I was like, "It's just a matter of time." Because you kind of get addicted to keeping some weight and size on your body, and you're not going to get that many calories from bananas. Great for endurance and good in the beginning, but and you could definitely build some muscle. Yeah, they didn't eat enough. And then he went to cooked food and he stacked even more muscle on. And I can tell he was a little conflicted about it. They changed what was it, Vancouver or Toronto Fruit Festival? They changed it to the Vegan Festival because he wasn't fruitarian anymore. And I knew that was going to happen. So you have to eat enough calories if you want to do something like that. The older we get, though, I plan on eating less and less calories. The older we get, you want to eat. You don't want to overburden the system with food when we're older. And I mean, when I'm in like my 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, like Dr. Fred Bish, he hardly eats anything. He does endurance athletics. He still lifts and stuff, but like, he's not looking to be. That's actually 25 anymore.
That's actually the main source of my frustration is like, how do I still eat enough without having some of the physical negative consequences of burdening my body with so much food, right? So that's been my personal challenge. And there's been periods where it's like, it's so clean and it feels light and it feels good, but then you kind of go back and forth, and it's a whole song and dance, to say the least. But I do feel like I enjoy eating less, but at the same time, if the lifestyle shifts all of a sudden and I'm like working a lot more, it becomes a lot more challenging. You're burning more calories or you're working out or whatever. So you both seem like you figured it out and you kind of like know your game plan. I'm still playing that song and dance a little bit right now.
Give it some time. If you're consistent with what you do, your body will communicate to you what's best for it, and it just falls into place.
Yeah,
it really, and it's actually not as complicated as everybody seems to make it think. It seems to think it is, and make it out to be on Instagram. So a lot of people trying to stand out, and they micromanage nutrition to the point to always having something special to share. I've been saying the same thing since YouTube started. The same, like there's a few new cool supplements that I really think are valuable that I talk about, but like that's it. It's the same shit over and over again. And it's much simpler than people think it is. I had a girl on TikTok. TikTok's a whole different animal when it comes to comments. You know how like YouTube is like kind of rough, like people definitely tell you you're a piece of shit. And then Instagram, everybody seems real polite, it's really nice. And then TikTok's kind of a mix of both, where like whatever generation is using that, they love to make fun of people, but they're not really mean by it. But anyway, I was reading the comments, and this one girl was like watching something I was saying, and she was like, yeah, that makes so much sense, but this guy's saying this and it's just so confusing. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, wow. I was like, I understand why this is confusing for people, because nobody has enough experience. No one's actually committed themselves to a process. It's an experiential lifestyle, and nobody's done anything long enough to really know, because everybody just came up standard American or standard European or standard wherever they're from. Every cultural diet in the world is pretty shit, unless it's indigenous, right? So like everything is pretty shit, and everybody started there, but nobody knows what to actually do. So, but it's experiential. It's experience that they need to have with it.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's like the largest rotating door. People are just in and out over and over, or like new people are coming and going.
Cool.
For sure.
Hey, I just have one more question. It was super quick answer. If there's like one plant food or plant drink that you think is beneficial for everyone, and that it'd be a great recommendation to incorporate into someone's diet, what would that be?
Raw vegetable juice is the absolute number one. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be celery. Number one. Raw. Everybody that I'm in my lineage of mentors and people, like we ask them, if you have to give up everything in the world, what do you need to keep? One food, raw juice, always. Nice. It's the most cleansing, but fortifying and alkalizing thing you can do for your body. without a doubt. I could live on juice if I had to live on juice. Some people do. Some people go like 8 months, 9 months just on raw juices. Yeah.
I'm going to go make some cucumber juice after this. I'm inspired.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome, Michael. Well, hey, thank you so much. You guys had an amazing conversation. Seriously, it was like, it was really,
you looked captivated.
I mean, like, I was just like, I was loving it. Honestly, I was in the zone. It was epic. I really enjoyed that. So
yeah, everything I talk about too is based on experience for people listening. So it's like it might not be the same experience for everyone. I could be wrong about things. I might change my mind on kidney filtration, but at this point in my career and stuff, like this is where I'm at. This is my truth. This is what I see. So yeah. So awesome. I could be wrong about things one day.
Cool. Well, hey, thanks for sharing the space with us. You can find yourself on Instagram. Everyday Detox is your handle.
Yeah. If people want to connect on social media, it's at Everyday Detox. If people are interested in the academy, it's everydaydetoxacademy.com. And if people happen to be in New York, they can visit one of my studios, vitalitynewyorkcity.com. Or if they're in Ashland and they want to see me, they happen to be in Southern Oregon, it's ashlandgravitycolonics.com.
Awesome. Cool. Well, that's all
Thank
for
you guys.
Appreciate
tonight.
It. Yeah, thanks for having us. Stay up, be great. Always keep it HUNNIT, baby.
Stay hungry.